Welcome to Let the People Know. We are here in Harrisburg at the state capitol, and today Pennsylvania Chambers are speaking with Governor Tom Wolf. Specifically, what is affecting you in the state budget in the greater Hazleton, greater Pottsville area? We're here today. We're going to speak with the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce, and you're going to hear from the governor himself. What is the importance of representation by Schuylkill County from being here in Harrisburg?
Well, we're part of a larger advocacy group, in this case today, Pennsylvania Association of Chamber Professionals, along with the PA Chamber of Business and Industry, runs an annual day here at the Capitol. It's all about advocacy. It's all about coming over and dealing with the major issues that we think impact the business and the nonprofit community. So the important issues we're discussing today is the state budget due up in June, at the end of June of 2017. We're hopeful that it passes on time. Otherwise, we have great impact to our businesses and especially our nonprofit community. Pension reform's been under debate in Pennsylvania for literally decades. Yesterday, Senate Bill 1 passed the Senate. We're hopeful that that passes the House. While it's not a utopic solution, it will stop the bleeding. We have $75 billion in pension deficit right now and growing, and we need a tourniquet on that. Otherwise, it impacts all of us with our tax dollars and how to pay for this. We'll be discussing the property tax reform. As we know, Senator Argall, our state senator, is in favor of property tax reform, but there's an impact to the business community on sales tax and personal income tax shifting. So that is a concern to the business community. We're trying to have a balanced debate on that today in the Capitol. And we're going to hear Governor Wolf address our assembly at lunchtime today, followed by the Transportation Secretary, Leslie Richards. And we're going to wind up with some discussions on workforce development, very important to our members, as well as a presentation by both the PA Chamber and the U.S. Chamber on advocacy efforts.
Okay, so you mentioned the property tax reform. When decisions are made for the entire state, how would you say Schuylkill County businesses, nonprofits, as far as the comparison when you're looking at what kind of shape they are in financially compared to maybe other parts of the state? Is that something where maybe Argall is in favor of the property tax reform?
Well, he's definitely in favor of property tax reform, and I think that you need to ask the senator, but I would say that the major driver is he has a very elderly constituency, and that's important both in Berks County and in Schuylkill County. But the business community is concerned about if you eliminate or lower one tax, such as property tax, it requires other taxes to be raised. And in this case, it would require sales tax increases and personal income tax raises to offset the shrinking property tax. The problem with that from a Chamber of Commerce perspective, while we support Senator Argall in his passion for his constituents, is it shifts tax onto the business community. And we've spoken with the senator about that, and he knows our concerns about that. And so there has to be a balancing. We want to help our elderly, but we don't want all the burden to go on to businesses, especially small businesses that have difficult with taking those burdens, those tax shifts, and dealing with them and still staying in business.
And so today, what do you hope to get out of the session? What kind of impact could the Schuylkill County Chamber and other chambers taking part in Chamber Day have in this decision?
Well, I think in all of the topics we're talking about, the first thing is come to the Capitol and deal with our legislative leaders. We have before us today the leaders on each of these topics in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. We're going to hear from Governor Wolf, the governor of Pennsylvania. It is very important in all of our advocacy efforts for us to have a presence, for us to put the agenda in front of them, for them to understand what we believe it does to the business and the nonprofit community, and then present advocacy positions, which we do through our Government Affairs Committee and our Transportation Committee of the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce, so they have no question of where we stand and what we believe is in the best interest of the business and nonprofit agenda. When we lay it out for them, then we expect them as our legislative leaders to respond and work with us for the betterment of the business community, and that's why we're here today. We're here in their home in Harrisburg, making sure that they know what the business agenda is and why we believe it's important not only for businesses, but for the jobs that businesses create.
Now, this is open to all chambers in the state. Do you know how many are participating?
We have about 120 different representatives from across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We have many chambers from east, west, north, and south. They all come here once a year for this forum. And as the Speaker of the House, Representative Mike Turzai, said this morning, he said that he believes the business community of Pennsylvania, through our chambers of commerce, have the loudest and most important advocacy voice in Pennsylvania. So it's very appropriate that we gather here once a year to go down our agenda items and make sure that they know that we represent business and the jobs that the business creates and the importance of our advocacy for all the people that the business community represents.
The Schuylkill Chamber is an advocacy group. We represent our members with state issues, such as what we were talking about this morning, pension reform, getting the budget done, and trying to operate our government with realistic numbers that will leave our children and grandchildren in a much stronger position.
Okay. You were just in session. What were some of the issues that were pertaining to the pension reform?
Some of the issues pertaining to pension reform this morning, the Senate yesterday had just passed another version of what they're hoping to be pension reform for the future. It'll come to the House this week. The House is saying that they're going to definitely take care of it Wednesday, Thursday timeframe, and there seems to be a commitment from the governor to sign legislation this year reforming our pension crisis in Pennsylvania.
How important is the representation for you to be here today? What kind of impact do you think or you feel you have on the state budget, specifically with the pension reform?
Local representation, specifically us from Schuylkill County, our representation is very important because we need to let our legislators know that we care, we listen, and we need to have reform. We need to have the issues and the problems of today taken care of so that we're not repeating the same next year, 10, 20 years from now, and we leave our government in better shape for our children and grandchildren.
Okay, so the chambers deal a lot with nonprofit organizations. That has to be a key issue when looking at specifically state funding that feeds and funnels into these nonprofits that basically live off of this. Has nonprofit money's been addressed through the chamber representation?
Absolutely. The Chamber does represent quite a large number of nonprofits. Our nonprofits are very important to the Chamber, and the Chamber advocates on the basis of getting the budget done on time. When the budget wasn't completed last year on time, we went into several months of unfunded programs for our local nonprofits that put an extreme level of stress on them and also the school districts or any organization that receives state funding. So they had to go out and borrow the money, and the cost for that money for the interest is not reimbursable. So it's an expenditure for our local nonprofits and even our school districts. The Chamber believes in a strong advocacy, in an active government, and we listen to our members, and then we'd like to come here in Harrisburg and let our elected officials know that we care, and we will hold their feet to the fire to get something done.
Now, from this session today, how will you go back and talk with the chamber members? How will the message of what you gave today be relayed back to those members?
The really good news from this morning, what we've learned from our representation is, number one, this is great timing for this organization. The Senate did pass another version of pension reform, for example. This week, as we had previously mentioned, the House is going to review it Wednesday, Thursday timeframe. So we will go back and we will inform our members that, yes, pension reform is taking some steps forward, and we are hopeful that it will get resolved in this year's budget. That's an important piece of information that we can relay to our members. And also we can tell them that we've met directly with our elected representatives. We brought their question to them, got answers, and we can report back to them progress.
Now, as you're doing your job with representation here, what can constituents do if they have concerns? Do they write to their legislators?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the chamber, what we do is if there are concerns or problems that we feel aren't addressed, if the organization, if the membership wanted addressed, then we need to raise awareness, and then our representatives are elected to represent us. If they're not hearing from us, then they don't know what the issue is. So we encourage that level of communication. It was a good morning, and I think it's good that more chambers should be involved, and the state organization is a very well-organized and disciplined organization. This is very beneficial annually to come to Harrisburg in June.
When we come back on Let the People Know, Senator Dave Argall tells us his thoughts on the budget, specifically on his stance on the issue of property tax reform. Plus, hear from Pennsylvania's Governor Tom Wolf, who had plenty to say to reporters during our time at the Capitol earlier this month. Welcome back to Let the People Know. We recently spent some time at the state capitol in Harrisburg, where lawmakers are debating the budget and trying to balance it out on time. Two of the hottest issues impacting our area are property tax reform and pension reform. Senator Dave Argall told us where he stands on property tax reform, while Governor Tom Wolf addressed both issues.
I introduced a bill on behalf of more than 80 different local taxpayer groups to eliminate the school district property tax. I believe it's archaic. I believe it's rotten at the core. I believe that we need to find a better way to fund the public schools today than this 1834 model. Last session, it came up for a vote. I lost by one vote. It was 24-24. So we're working with different groups to look at possible amendments to improve it and to get it to the House and onto the governor's desk.
Mm-hmm. When you look at its effects, you're looking at the entire state, obviously. When
Sure.
you're looking at the effects that it could have on local businesses, they might be opposing this because that has to filter down to other taxes that would affect businesses.
And of course, it affects everyone differently. There's another version that would just say, well, just do it for homeowners, not for businesses. Mm-hmm. And so it's a political minefield, but we're trying to work our way through it because, as I said, there has to be a better way to fund the public schools mm-hmm. than the way we do today.
When you look at all the voices that come before you, it is a hard decision looking at the entire state,
Sure.
I'm assuming. So what comes to play with that? What will be the deciding
The diversity of Pennsylvania, quite honestly, is one of the main challenges because while it's the number one issue that I hear at my town hall meetings, that I can't go to a Cub Scout meeting without someone complaining to me about school district property taxes. It's not that way in the entire state. If every senator got as many complaints about this issue as I did, trust me, we would have passed this by now.
When you look at your constituents, you could break them up as in more senior citizens?
I've got a lot of seniors in Schuylkill County. I've got a lot of seniors in Berks County. They're really impacted by this, and we always say that, look, no tax should make people homeless. If they bought their house 30, 40, 50 years ago, maybe then it was connected to their ability to pay. Well, things change, and so it's really heartbreaking when people come into my office in Pottsville or Tamaqua or down in Sinking Spring and say, look, I can't afford to pay my property taxes. And so that's one of the reasons I got into this fight.
Okay. We're in much better shape with the budget this year than previous years as far as getting it passed on time?
We keep hearing good things that we're going to hit the June 30th deadline. I hope that optimism is based in reality. We're about to find out. But yes, we're the House, the Senate, the governor, we're all working together. That's the good news. The bad news is we're looking at a $3 billion deficit. The economy has just not bounced back after that terrible recession the way that we had hoped. And so we're looking, are there some reasonable cuts that can be made? The governor is no longer talking in terms of huge increases in sales taxes and income taxes, looking at other ways to balance the budget. Unlike my friends in Washington, we have to pass pass a balanced budget. It's in the state constitution. On your trip around the Capitol today, you look around, you won't see anybody printing money in any of the offices. And if they are, they'll go to jail. But yeah, it's a challenge, but we seem to be making some good progress.
So if we're looking for a budget update, as we're a couple of weeks away now from the due date, what would that be?
Well, I think we're making some progress. I think the pension issue seemed to have sprung a surprise on a lot of people. We've actually been working very hard on a lot of things, and the pension reform issue is one of the first. And I'm really proud of what we've been doing, working across the party lines between the chambers. And I think you'll see the same kind of thing with the I'm hoping with the budget as we move forward.
Critics of that pension plan, though, and you just talked about how crushing the debt is for all stratas of government. They say that this bill doesn't really help that.
Yeah, it does. That's because they don't understand it. The issue is that the debt it's not really, it's an unfunded liability, and it's an unfunded liability that exists over the next 30 years, and it's $50-some billion, but there's also going to be money coming in over the next 30 years. So it depends on what interest rates do and that defined benefit plan for people that are already covered as to what the size of that unfunded unfunded liability actually is. What we're doing with this is to create less risk for the Commonwealth. And basically what it says is, if you look out to, I think it's 2037, there's a big reduction in expenditures budgeted because the pension expense will go down. And that's because you have a lot of people on this defined benefit plan. You have a low interest rate environment, which is, I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, that increases the present value of your pension liability. So if you go to more of a 401k style, you have less risk for the taxpayer, and by the time you get to 2037, you actually do have a reduction. If you don't do this ever, each year, your expense just keeps going out, and you don't get to that 2037 ever. So this is a big deal, and it really does address the issue. And actually, over the course of that 30 years, depending on what you look at in terms of risk, it will chop off over that 30-year period somewhere between 10 and $20 billion.
Governor Wolf, have you received a commitment from the legislature to take action on another policy issue in exchange for your support on this? Like, for example, minimum wage increase or the anti-discrimination ordinance law extension for sexual orientation, things like that. Have you gotten any, or even education funding at the levels
the real bargain here, Charlie, is that this is good for Pennsylvania, and that's what I'm trying to do, and I think that's what we all agreed that we're all trying to do, and so this is something that is not meant to be a quid pro quo for something. I'm not giving anything up. I'm doing something that I think is fair to employees. I think it actually does have a really good chance of reducing the unfunded liability for the state and reducing expenses as quickly as possible for Pennsylvanians, and that's not anything that needs to be traded for. That's a good thing in and of itself. Is there work we still have to do? Yeah, and I think we'll continue to work on that. But this is a really good start.
How about just one last update on the budget again? Are we? Do you think June 30th we're going to make the deadline? Or what do you think?
You mean like June 30th to July 15th sometime? And that you call that on time? What do you call on time?
What do you call on time?
Sometime between June 30th and July 15th.
You think we'll make that?
Yes.
And as you heard from the governor, the budget is expected to be passed on time. We'll know then how the issues play out for pension reform and property tax reform. You're watching a special edition of Let the People Know. We're here at the state capitol in Harrisburg. We'll see you next time.